Hi, friends. My name's Trish Roberts, and you're going to be listening to or watching a discussion with two guests, Angel Flinn, and Angel Flinn is from Gentle World. Gentle World is a vegan intentional community, and I'll let Angel speak about that. She's also going to talk about how she became vegan and various issues in relation to that. And Keith Berger from South Florida Vegan Education Group will be joining us. So it should be it's just a chat, really, more than an interview. These are just informal chats. And so I'll bring in our guest, Angel, and let's see. Hi, Angel.
Hi, Trish. Good to see you.
So, Angel, you've been involved with Gentle World for quite a few years now. So if you wouldn't mind just sharing with us how Gentle World began and take it from there.
Sure. Yeah, I've been involved with Gentle World since the year 2000, but it actually goes back a long way. The community was founded in the year 1970, and that was a time when veganism was really not known about at all. And that's really formed the basis for the Gentle World community, because it was a handful of people who had become vegan just sort of through their own understanding of what happens to animals along the way to becoming meat, milk, eggs. As they came to learn the reality of this, they just realized one thing at a time that they couldn't really participate in this anymore, and became vegan without knowing there was a word for it or anything like that. So when there were just a few people who all felt the same way, they decided, well, we better get together, and they actually formed, an intentional community that's lasted until now and is actually thriving at a time when many communities, of course, petered out along the way. Gentle World has continued, and I think veganism has been a tremendous part of that. And along the way of being an intentional community, what they realized was that part of what they wanted to do, of course, was to educate other people about veganism. And that's how it also became an educational organization.
That's fantastic. Yeah. I'll just introduce Keith. We'll just add Keith into this, and Keith can feel free. She'll be popping in a sec. Feel free, Keith, to just jump in and ask Angel any questions that you wish. So Angel, when you've got there's two locations, isn't there? There's like Hawaii, and then there's New Zealand. So you're currently in Hawaii at the moment. What's it like sort of being in Hawaii, and like what would you say is an average sort of a day for you, because you're the educational outreach person? So how do you go about that at Gentle World?
Okay, sure. Well, first of all, to answer your question about being in Hawaii, I certainly feel very fortunate to be here. It's quite an amazing place to be. We have beautiful weather, though it's not the 365 days of sunshine that people think it is. It's actually a very, really good growing climate as well. It's not just beautiful sunshine, but we have a good amount of rainfall. And really one of the amazing things about Hawaii is just the food that grows here and how easy it is to grow food here. Things grow really quickly, they grow really well, and that's a big part of what we do is teaching people also about organic gardening, because that's a big part of what a lot of people want to know about, is how to actually, grow this food themselves, and especially organically without the use of animal byproducts as well. So that's what we call veganic.
I've seen that video actually on YouTube of you all like really bringing an amazing harvest. Like it was really great to see. And then you had that terrible sort of it was a flood, wasn't it, about 5 months ago? Did Gentle World recover from that? Like the actual structures and everything? How is that going?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because with a flooded river, one of the things that happens is it changes the actual landscape itself. So that's something that will continue to change as the years go on. The river just has its way of carving out its path, and it can change banks and pools and all sorts of other things.
Yeah.
It did, as I'm sure you saw and other people saw in our announcement at the time, it took away several of our caravans. So that was either that people were living in, or caravans that were being used for storing equipment and things like that. So we took a bit of a loss as a result of that. But what we did was we put out a call to our supporters, and that was actually an incredibly beautiful thing about the flood, was the outpouring of support that we received from people who, some of them were people we knew, friends and, fans from over the years. And then other times we received contributions from people who we had never heard the names. And it was just so beautiful because people were sending us messages of, gratitude for what we do. And I assume a lot of that was from, following the website and subscribing to our newsletter and reading the articles that we put out. And so to feel, people wanting to actually pitch in and support us when we needed it was incredibly heartwarming. So it was actually a gift that the flood gave. And we did manage to recover our costs, which was really wonderful. And hopefully when we get there next time, we'll be able to even make some improvements. So I think it'll all ultimately work out for the best.
I think it's amazing, hey Keith, that Gentle World has managed to keep going through all this, through this decades, basically. It's been going for ages. I just think it's amazing that it's kept going. And let's face it, things aren't getting easier, in a financial sense for organizations that are alternatives like this, which is so important, really. I mean, I think organizations like Gentle World that they promote veganism up front and center. They don't promote the idea of humane animal use. That's a complete myth and a nonsense and very speciesist. And your blogs. Keith and I were just talking about just before we came on how much we admire Angel's blog writing. She's got this incredible way with words, and I invite people to check out gentleworld.org and check out some of Angel's writings on there. It's really wonderful. It's morally consistent veganism. There's no, it's just a lovely way that she has of presenting this most important social justice issue. That's really great. Did you have some questions you'd like to ask Angel, Keith? I'm
going to join the Angel Flinn Admiration Society for a moment and reiterate what I told her back in the green room before we came on, which is that sometime after I started living vegan, I don't know how long it was, but I was poking around on the internet and I found some of Angel's writing, and I'm pretty critical about writing. There's a lot of really poor writing in the world, and I started reading some of what Angel was, I could talk about you in the first person, some of what you were putting out, Angel, and I was really impressed at your ability to impart the ideas eloquently and succinctly, and just to speak in a voice that, not to be punny or anything, but in a way that was gentle and firm at the same time. It really got the point across that veganism is, the importance of veganism as a social justice issue, and that it's, this isn't about diets and fads and things that come and go. This is about an important issue that that the converse of claims the lives of billions, if not trillions, of sentient individuals every year. So, eventually I was going to say I put pen to paper, but I didn't. I put fingers to keyboard at the behest of Elena Brodskaya, my girlfriend and partner at South Florida Vegan Education Group, and with Trish's encouragement or cajoling maybe, and some other people, I started writing my own blog. And I hold myself to a high standard, but I'm really inspired by what you've done and what Trish has done on her websites with podcasts.
I could only hope to write as well as Angel, and speak as well as Angel. But Angel, so tell us about when you what happened? Like how long have you been vegan, and what happened as a catalyst for you becoming vegan?
Well, as for many people, it was an evolutionary journey. So it kind of started for me when I was a teenager, and I had sort of gotten the the activism bug, I guess you could say. Some of my friends who were in, we call it university, you guys call it college, but older friends had gotten involved with activist groups, and all of a sudden were starting to make me aware of some of these issues, environmental issues and animal rights and human rights issues. And I found myself all of a sudden tremendously passionate about trying to change some of these things that were going on. I got very discouraged about a lot of different things. And along the way, I became friends with people who were doing, animal rights work in different forms, and were following a vegan diet, or mostly vegan diet. And that's where I kind of got hung up in the beginning, was because I thought that's where it kind of ends, like some of my friends who were in animal rights were telling me they were already kind of making excuses and justifying doing certain things. And I bought into that. And then when I met Gentle World, and all of a sudden I was talking to the founders of Gentle World, who've been vegan since 1970, and trying to justify some of my own vegan shortcomings, you might say, things that I let myself cheat on, or, wearing leather, wearing wool, wearing a bone carving around my neck, that kind of thing. They just got really real with me about it, and said, we were doing this back when it was really hard. There weren't health food stores. There wasn't tofu. There wasn't soy milk. Nobody knew the word vegan. There were no recipes. There was nothing you can buy in stores. And through, kind of just having this realization of the fact that the angle that I had come to it from was actually not really seeing it 100% clearly. I had already made these changes in my life. I had given up, meat when I was a teenager, because it just, once I really put it together, it's a dead animal. It was kind of a no-brainer. And then I started to discover, okay, well, this is what happens on dairy farms. I never really thought about it, and then all of a sudden I'm watching this animal rights footage of animals in a dairy farm and seeing the reality of that. And then, the male chicks get ground up alive, take eggs, all those things. It kind of pieced together for me. But then when I met Gentle World, I started to realize, no, this is something very deep. This is something very profound. And it's really a very powerful statement against injustice. It's not just kind of a political boycott in a sense. It's really more of a very profound personal commitment to nonviolence in our own lives, and towards, bringing about a just world for all these other animals that we share the planet with, not just the ones on the farms. Every animal on the planet is a victim of our speciesism. And, that's why veganism holds the power to change, everything, really. Holds the power to change everything.
Really, really it does. There's so many factors, just not only just about non-human animals, which I believe, is the most important thing about veganism, to address that, their property status and end their property status, but the environmental impacts, the health impacts, impacts on world hunger, so many things. And you've written about that in Gentle World. You've written about that on the blog, about world hunger, about this idea also that for those who think that animal products, there's such a thing as, environmentally friendly animal products. You've covered so many different issues on Gentle World. Of course, the main theme is non-human animals and their very basic right not to be used as things, as resources. But that's why Gentle World, the actual blog, is such a great resource for those who are interested in becoming vegan, because it's got so much information there. And I've used some of that on my vegan podcast, howtogovegan.org. I've sort of used some information from Gentle World, because it is it's so clear. And that's what we need. We need clarity in this. If we're going to have any sort of progress, that's what we need, isn't it? Is clarity, is moral consistency, and so that's, I personally value that blog very, very much, and I know that Keith does. Keith, did you want to ask any other questions about Gentle World, or about anything in particular that you wanted to? ask?
Sure.
Or did you have
sure.
any particular that you wanted to talk about, Angel, as well as what you were saying about becoming vegan?
Well, I had a
Did I?
question.
Yes, did you?
No, go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, if I could ask
Yes.
Angel one question. Because I think I know Trish and I have talked about speciesism a bit in previous live streams. And I know that you've written about it a bit. So how would you define that? Because I've spoken about it, Trish has spoken about it, but it's nice to get another person's point of view, especially for people who are either listening now or will listen later and have never heard the word speciesism before. How would you define that, and what examples would you give of what that looks like?
Well, I think it's a really crucial point, for talking about veganism and for talking about animal rights. There's really no point in discussing animal rights without discussing speciesism and veganism. They're very much interlinked. Really, I think it's a simple matter of holding a certain prejudice, shall we say, holding an attitude against someone else that is not based on reason, but based on a kind of a false understanding of who that other is. And, when it comes to our attitude towards animals, we have this very bizarre sort of behavior towards them that's based in this idea that that they're not entitled to the same sort of fundamental respect for their rights as we are. So when we talk about animal rights, sometimes people think that we are advocating for the same kind of rights that we talk about when we're talking about human rights. The right to marry, the right to education, the right to vote, the right to drive, all of those kinds of things. But of course, when it comes to animals, it's really the kind of rights that we're asking for are very basic, fundamental rights, which is basically the right not to be exploited by others. And as humans, we have this idea somehow that everyone and everything else on the planet exists for our benefit. And whether or not people would actually say that out loud, that's the way that we behave. And we certainly, sorry?
They often
do say that. Yes, that's right. People do say that. And of course, likewise for this whole concept of animals being sentient and animals feeling pain and having consciousness, even though most people nowadays understand that intellectually, most people live as though that's not the case. Those of us who are in the animal rights movement and have seen with our own eyes the reality of what goes on, the reality that most people don't want to look at. Animals are treated by our society as though they don't feel. And even though most people, as I said previously, most people would claim that they understand that animals feel pain, and yet we live as though we don't understand that. But back to your point about speciesism, I think it's a simple matter of when we look at any particular issue, like let's say the issue of breeding animals for people to keep as companions. That's a big issue we're facing right now on this island that we live on, because and this is true, of course, everywhere, the population of animals, homeless animals, is just, growing and growing and growing. And we've been in touch with a woman at an animal shelter who rescues dogs and, devotes her life to it. And we're fostering a couple of dogs on her behalf and trying to adopt them out. And of course, there are just so many of them that it's really hard to find homes. And what do the shelters do? They kill them. Mm. And of course, this is even a contentious issue in the animal rights movement, because there are people in the movement who think that that's, the right thing to do is kill the homeless animals. And I think that's a really key point to illustrate speciesism, because you can, if you just do the simple mental exercise of replacing dogs and cats and other companion type animals, or animals who are used as companions, with humans, and you look at, for instance, human refugees, And anybody kind of suggesting that the correct solution would be to euthanize humans who don't have homes. It's a classic illustration of a speciesist attitude that we think it's okay to do that to animals, to non-human animals, something that we would never, ever do to humans.
Yes.
So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, and I've thought about that a bit and written some about it myself. That I was reading on an article somewhere, and somewhere in the United States there were animals that were not indigenous to the local area, and they were coming around and they were breaking into garbage cans. They were eating food and leaving the mess around, and that local municipality was advocating to kill them, to just catch them and kill them because they were nuisances. And I thought, there's several problems here. One of which is that we would never advocate to end the homeless human problem by killing the homeless humans. That's not something we do. Second thing is that if these particular breeds or species of animals rather are not indigenous to the local area, then you can bet that they got there by some human intervention. So we made a mistake and brought someone who wasn't supposed to live somewhere to somewhere where they can't live in a natural way. So it's our mistake, and we tend as a group to solve the mistakes we make by killing. This is something I've seen a lot, or that's the best we can come up with, which really isn't so good. So it would be as if the mistake was bringing the non-indigenous animals to the area and then they go wild. And this would be tantamount to, I leave my front door unlocked and a homeless individual wanders in and makes him or herself a sandwich in my kitchen. Probably legally, at least in the state of Florida, where we're all kind of savages, I might be able to kill that person because they're in my house. But is that the morally right or morally just thing to do? It's a fear reaction. It's a reaction that goes into some form of denial, whether it's rationalization, justification, minimization of our responsibility and our duties. And it's not morally justifiable. So yeah, when you do change the picture from non-human animal to human, you start to see that we would never accept these things if humans were the victims. But as soon as there are animals, we start saying, well, we can change that around, and that is speciesism.
That's right.
And not to take up all the air in the room, but I wrote a blog post a couple of days ago because I was in a supermarket and I saw two magazines, one on top, one on the bottom. The top one was Time magazine, and the cover story had a picture of a dog, and it said, the animal mind, what they think, what they feel, how to understand them. So clearly we've determined that yes, they think, yes, they feel, and they're understandable if you take the time. The magazine below that it said grilling, and it had pictures of other animals. We're going to guess they're not dogs. It looked like cow parts being grilled. So it's, animals, how they think, how they feel, how to understand them, and how to grill them once we've killed them. And I'm looking at that going, that's such an example of our species, this society, and how many people noticed that walking through that line, and how many people might have looked and said, oh, look, dogs, they think, they feel, that's great. I better take this home so I can barbecue effectively. So it's, from a vegan perspective, it becomes bothersome, and it's something that we all strive to educate other people about, to be open to those ideas and to be mindful and look around and then take a stand where we know that something is wrong.
Yeah.
So Angel, what would you say a day consists of? Say as an education outreach person, what how does one go about that? Do you have like a stall, or do you have like where people go to sort of stay at Gentle World and sort of participate in, growing food, etc.? How exactly do you have like teaching, like an education night? How do you go about that, or is it just the holistic experience of that?
Well, I mean, it is a holistic approach. We kind of have a multi-pronged approach to outreach, I guess you could say. Certainly, when I first got involved with the organization, one of the main things that we did is, seminars and cooking classes and private consultations and film screenings and things like that. And that's something that we still try to do periodically. We certainly have, every year we do a public event where people from the local area here are invited to come and attend, an educational presentation of some sort, and then also experience a beautiful vegan meal completely free of charge. So we always try to give all of the education that we do is free of charge. We don't charge anything for what we do, with the exception of our cookbooks, which have, distribution and printing costs. But so we do the public outreach. In our local community here, quite often we'll just have people, people introduce us to other people who are interested in going vegan. And when that happens, we will always invite people to either just enjoy a meal and just talk to us, or be talked to, discuss the subject. And if people want to, we certainly welcome people to come for cooking classes and just to discuss, the way that you eat, the way that you stock your pantry, the way that you shop, all of that kind of thing. So we have that aspect to it. Then we have, of course, our online outreach, and that's a huge part of what we do nowadays, because we have the website, we have the newsletter, we have a YouTube channel, we have our Facebook page. So we're trying to, utilize the internet as much as possible and really more and more refine that. And we're actually in the process of doing a big overhaul of that, which we're hoping at the other end of it to be much more effective even in what we do. And then the other aspect is this, what we call the live-in or immersive educational experience. So it's, being an intentional community, we have this opportunity to actually welcome people in to our communal shared living space here. And we're a part of various, educational networks where people come and they kind of volunteer for, say, a week. They just come and they live with us and they participate in cooking the meals and they participate in working the garden and helping to keep the house and the center clean and different things like that while they're here. And as part of that experience, they get to both learn how you eat, which is a big deal for a lot of people. Those of us who are vegan know that it really isn't a big deal, but for people making the transition, it helps a lot when they can just experience mealtime, and just come to see that, this isn't that weird. This is actually pretty familiar, and I can do this, and it is actually easy, and it tastes great. And I do get full, and I don't feel like I'm missing anything, and I'm not craving meat. And actually, look, I feel better. My body feels lighter, and I have more energy, and I'm starting to clean out, and, they get to have that experience. And then while they're here for that week, we talk to them. That's one of the biggest things we do, is we just talk to them about what it means to us, our personal journeys, how we became vegan, what we think veganism is really all about, that, this is not about health. Yes, the environment is a big issue, but it's not the reason that we're vegan. It's really because of, these animals have a right to live. It's as simple as that. They want to live. We have no reason to kill them. Look, we've been doing it all these years. There are people here who've been vegan for 50 years, almost 50 years. So when people come and they meet this whole range of people, all different ages from all over the place, people who have been vegan a shorter and longer time, it gives them the confidence to be able to do it themselves. And then also, we let people, participate in, actually specifically learning how to make food, certain things that we do that are our specialties that we'll show people. And then also we show them films. We definitely show people films, and we've put some together ourselves. We have our own, we have a 25-minute YouTube video that, if people are curious to know more about Gentle World, the history, what we do, what our visitor program is like, what our place is like in New Zealand, mostly, that's where it was filmed, and what veganism is about to us, that video will give people a really good overview. So we always show that to people who come here, And then some other things that we've just put together, some documentaries that we believe are really good at influencing people. And then things that we've put together from little clips of, really powerful vegan presentations from around the internet that we put together and just let people sit and watch. And that usually has a really profound impact as well. But I think part of what helps is that they watch those things in the context of being in this kind of an environment. So they don't walk in the door and we put them in front of a film right away. I mean, we do that. We do a film screening event. As I said, once a year, we usually show film. So we have that kind of outreach, but it's different when people are here and they get to, they settle in, they get comfortable, they eat some really good food, they meet people, they start to feel like, this is a comfortable environment to be in. They let their guard down. And after they've had some really good food, which I think really helps people as well, just to feel like, nobody's trying to take anything away from you. It helps them to actually open up to the message. And so very often, I have to say, by the end of a week of being here, people are ready to be vegan when they leave. It's really not that difficult once they experience it, with all the support around them. And also, as you said earlier, Trish, with just that clarity of, this is what the message is. It's really a very simple thing. Do you want to cause harm or do you not want to cause harm? If this harm is avoidable. I mean, we all obviously living on the planet are going to be causing harm. That's just a reality to being alive on this planet. But if there's harm that we cause that we can avoid causing, we have the option to actually not do that, then isn't that what we would prefer? And when you present it to people like that, it's surprising how easy it is for people to actually open up to it. And having said that, of course, the people who come here tend to be people who already are open. And that's one of the things I love about doing vegan education in this kind of a setting is we're not going out and sort of, bashing people over the head with it who maybe aren't actually interested and are never going to be interested. The people who we're talking to are people who already have sought us out. So, and I think that's something that, we have a unique opportunity here, but a lot of activists have a similar opportunity, even with the internet, by just making themselves a home on the net and speaking to the people who come to them. Like there are ways of getting yourself out there using the internet to sort of broadcast what you're doing and then interacting with the people who engage with you. If people are coming and even sometimes if people are, giving critical comments or something like that, it's an opportunity for dialogue. So, I think everybody can kind of use that approach in their own way as well.
So when did you actually, when you became vegan, did you still sort of have the idea, or were you still sort of promoting any sort of slightly speciesist things, like if somebody said, well, I can't, like I'm talking about now the humane myth sort of thing. Was there a time where it all came together immediately when you became vegan, like you realized that anything less than becoming vegan is participating in violence? Was there a moment? Was it sort of at the same time you became vegan, or was it sort of later on it really clicked to you that position, if you know what I mean? The rejection of the idea that there's nice ways to use animals.
Right, sure.
Because you write such wonderful blogs about this myth of humane use, the speciesism of that. And I put humane in quotes. So, if you can share sort of, your realization of that, when it was something that just must be rejected outright. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, it's a good question because, when I really, really became vegan, as I said, when I had my real epiphany, it was very much a sort of, a full-blown sort of realization that I don't want to have anything to do with this animal industry at all anymore. And when I used to have, when I was kind of vegetarian leaning towards vegan, I used to go around, preaching about it all the time, that, dairy and eggs and this and that and the other. And people would say to me, well, aren't you wearing leather shoes? And just to speak to your point about, speciesism and sort of preaching one thing and doing another thing, I had all sorts of justifications for that. I thought that was a completely different thing. It's unrelated to, what I'm telling you should be doing. And when it really dropped in me, and it was like this, okay, like I say, an epiphany, an aha moment. It was when we gave a seminar after I had joined with Gentle World, and I was participating as a volunteer in a seminar to tell other people about veganism. And the co-founder of Gentle World's son, who I'm sure if anybody is watching this and does read our newsletter, you're probably familiar with Sun's writing, because she writes also incredible pieces. 50 years of veganism behind her. You know, she's got a lot of wisdom and inspiration to share. So she was standing up at this event, speaking about veganism very powerfully from her heart. And you know, she said, I'll never forget it really, I can't remember her precise words, but she was saying, basically, you know, as somebody who is really, you know, torn apart inside by the reality of animal exploitation and how horrendous this is, you know, it's horrifying when you kind of come to the realization that you can't stop it. You want to just be able to put an end to the entire thing right now, you know, not to have to convince the entire world over years and years, but just you want it to end. And she said, you know, I can't stop it from happening. I can't stop them from doing it, but I can stop them from doing it for me. I don't have to place my order for that. You know, I can withdraw my support completely. And when she said that, that was it for me. That was when I stopped all my rationalization. I stopped all my resisting. And I just said, okay, you know, yes, 100% vegan. I don't want any of it. I don't want my leather. I don't want wool. I don't want honey. I don't want, you know, none of it. And what a huge relief that was to just not have to keep all this mental energy around justifying things that I really couldn't justify.
Yes.
So that was, you know, becoming vegan. And as far as the humane, you know, the welfare aspects of it, that did come for me later, not in the sense that I would promote anything like that or, you know, believe in anything like that. But it took a bit of education for me, learning about how insidious this, you know, this notion that has found its way into the animal advocacy movement, how badly that's actually hurting the animal advocacy movement. And it took other activists helping me to really understand that. And thank goodness for that, really, because it was a huge, you know, lifting of the veil just to realize that that the movement has actually been kind of co-opted in a way. And I was thinking about this recently because I was remembering reading, and I have to say I've read a lot of really powerful stuff on this. And of course, it's a wonderful thing that it is being discussed. And I think it's changed a lot in the last, you know, even since I've been, you know, out there writing, which is probably about maybe 8 or 9 years, I think, at this point, since I started doing my blog. And I started on, you know, the website Care2, which, of course, is not a vegan site. And, that, you know, they do talk a lot about various, you know, animal welfare issues and that kind of thing. And certainly the audience tends towards that kind of a leaning. So when I came out and started speaking about veganism, there was a lot of response about, you know, but those things are solved by, you know, free-range, cage-free, grass-fed, you know, quote-unquote humane farming. And so, what's that?
You know, I always say that humanely raised is still knife-killed, so I don't see how that helps.
Of course, and the really good thing now is that I would say the vegan movement is increasingly getting behind this, you know, this stand that's not the angle we want to take. We don't want to be telling people to eat, you know, slightly better options, because the fact is they all are involving this extreme rights violations of the individuals involved, no matter whether it's cage-free, free-range, all of that. And I was just remembering reading a piece, I don't know if you two are familiar with it, but I was thinking that everybody should really read these two pieces. One is called Project for the New American Carnivore. James Levesque from Humane Myth, from Tribe of Heart, and Jenny Stein. They wrote an incredible article called Project for the New American Carnivore. And then James Levesque also wrote Invasion of the Movement Snatchers. And he talks about how you read that. Okay, so everybody should read this piece because it really explains how we've been duped, and the movement has really been largely, or at least was at a certain point, co-opted by these corporate interests that wanted to just manipulate it and start having people say the things they wanted them to say, which was not stop using animals, but use animals a little bit more nicely. And so that was really a powerful eye-opener for me, I have to say, when I read that. And of course, lots of other things too. There are, pioneers of that subject to whom I am indebted, and friends of mine who helped me to learn all about the ins and outs of that.
When did you read that article, that last one that you mentioned by Levesque?
Gosh, a long time ago now. It must be
a long time ago.
Long time ago, yeah, over 10 years, maybe even 12 years.
Wow. So the light really sort of switched on then, and it's true, about the corporate, the corporate takeover. Basically, if ever there was a point where it was all about the animals, if ever there was a point, it's been completely lost, and it's all about keeping the business going, and that seems to happen with most movements. It's happened in the environmental movement. How I only watched Cowspiracy just recently, and you see that their sponsors are often connections with the animal industry and and animal product industries and pharma and all of this. So they're not going to want to talk about the environmental industry, Greenpeace and 350.org and all those different ones. They don't want to talk about the greatest contributor to climate change, which is animal agriculture, 51% of greenhouse gases. So, that's all sort of kept right down there, and it's inconvenient. And then, and the animal movement, this animal movement, which, is put movement in quotes, it's just a disaster. They're like branches of industry now, really, what these different large animal organizations. Would you say that's a fair sort of a characterization?
Well, I mean, I think that the really positive thing that's going on now is that there is, from what I can tell, there's a genuine grassroots movement growing. And of course, the internet, giving people the opportunity to, to do activism without needing to be in a huge organization with lots of resources, has really, I think, the internet, of course, has both sides, but it does have an incredible ability to bring people together and to allow people to network, to allow the little people to network in a way. And of course, there's an increasing number of people who are, dissatisfied with the rate of progress and the way that things are happening. And there's a certain amount of banding together. I mean, yes, there's a lot of division, but I think there's also a lot of really good things happening right now where it's almost like there's a new movement growing. There's a resurgence or a renaissance, maybe, in a sense, of the animal rights movement that you see more and more. I know on my Facebook page, the people that I'm connected with, a lot of the time, I'm really kind of proud of what people are posting, that they're really getting out there with a very clear vegan message and really, making it obvious that this is the way, that, there's no other way that we're going to be able to free the animals other than showing people how and why to become vegan. That's what we need to do. Everything else is kind of just pointless, because as long as there's the demand for it, it's going to keep happening. And, eliminating the demand is the only way. And that just takes helping people to understand what veganism is about and helping people learn how to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we can all, and it's up to all of us. It's up to all of us to put this message out, to educate ourselves, and to get to a morally consistent position. Simply put, anything less than becoming vegan is participating in violence, and any of these meat-free Mondays and all these various, the baby steps and the journeys and all of that, it's all just, it's an excuse to not do what is required, the moral imperative, which is to just stop using sentient beings as resources. That's really and it's not difficult, is it, Angel? I mean, we all discovered it's not difficult, and there's fantastic, not only is it the right thing to do, but there's fantastic benefits for all of us, for the planet, for our health, our connection to the world as it is. I mean, the 99.99% of the planet's population are non-human animals, and they belong on this planet just as much as we do, and their rights deserve to be considered. Their right to not be exploited and to be able to live in peace. And until we, I say this often, until we recognize that, we're never ever going to have peace on this planet, because basically, what we're doing to non-human animals, we're doing to humans. It's a tremendous violence that it can't exist on this planet and not have catastrophic, far-reaching effects. We can't be killing 1 trillion land and aquatic animals every year for these trivial reasons, because we don't need animal products at all. But we can't be doing that and it not have effects on all of us, on our interactions with one another, humans, and that's sort of something that we're all trying to encourage people to understand, is that it's not some sort of a movement out here, that is irrelevant, to us. It's relevant to every single one of our lives, that we can't continue participating in this violence. Every 4 days, there's more animals killed than all humans, that have been killed in genocide, murders, plagues and wars in 4 days. I mean, it's unbelievable that it cannot possibly not enter into our lives, this violence that's going on every second of every day. And the only way we can stop it is for us all to, recognize this and become vegan, and then encourage others to do so. It's not going to happen through large animal organizations that are promoting all kinds of happy animal products and happy animal slavery, and joining with industry and promoting these terrible, torturous ways to use animals that, if applied to humans, would be considered torture. The only way we're going to really move this along is for a grassroots, non-violent, vegan movement. And that's why organizations like Gentle World and South Florida Vegan Education Group is just so, it's so important, because veganism is up front and center. There is no speciesism on the side. It's this is where we're going to move, and everybody can do this. Everybody that's watching this can take the initiative right now and become vegan. It's sort of something we don't have to wait for anybody else to do, and we don't have to wait for anybody. It's us. We're the ones we've been waiting for, kind of thing. So,
that's right. That's right. And I have to say, for people who who haven't yet become vegan, the one thing that often kind of amazes me is just the realization that people really don't know what they're missing out on, by not becoming vegan. When people are holding on to, their own resistance to that, they're really keeping from themselves a tremendous joy and a tremendous freedom from a whole lot of, just incongruencies between principles and behavior. And I know, your audience is this very, progressive audience, which is, people with the ability to actually think about the impact of one behavior on others, whether that's human beings of another gender, class, race, people in another country or whatever. And I think it's a powerful opportunity for people who already feel that way about human beings to extend this further and to be able to just say, okay, let me look at this. Let me just look at this objectively. Take myself out of the picture for a moment and just look at this objectively and see, what this is really is it's predatory behavior. And, predatory behavior is something that we can engage in towards animals if we eat them, or we eat their, other things that come from them, or use other things that come from them. But it's the same behavior or the same mentality that allows us to exploit each other and to overlook, human rights violations. It's this whole notion that one person's gain can be more important than another person's, fundamental rights. So, for instance, we might, like the way a certain food tastes, or I'm sorry, I'm sure you can hear the dogs at this point.
No, that was
I was hoping I would be my head.
That's all right.
Yes. So often when we're using animals, we're overlooking their fundamental rights for something that is for us a mere matter of, convenience or taste or pleasure or desire or something like that. And that's something that if we look at it in the human rights context, we would never be able to justify.
Yeah, and that's something that it's good, that we put forward that, it can't, what we're sort of saying is okay for non-human animals. We would never say, there's okay for humans. And that's something that we need to highlight, because there's an inherent speciesism in that there's this whole other set of, values we have for sentient beings, that we're all sentient beings. And, non-human animals, they feel, they have likes and dislikes, they interact with the world and one another. And, so until we really truly recognize that in our hearts, we're not going to be able to sort of really grasp. We're not going to be able to fully live. That's where I feel about it. Until we're doing our best in some ways. It's an inconvenient thing to be able to acknowledge, that there's that non-human animals are sentient. It's inconvenient. Sometimes we acknowledge it, and other times when it's inconvenient, we don't, and we go back and forth, and we see it all the time in the news. When a cow escapes a slaughterhouse, and everybody's rooting for the cow and kind of going, oh, I hope that cow escapes. And and then while we're doing it, we're sitting and eating a burger in front of the TV. It's so and if somebody, like Keith mentioned last time, if somebody were hurting like say a pig, in front of us, we would probably step in and do something. And yet we're doing all sorts of horrific things to pigs, on whether it be, the industrialized farms or the mom and pop farms and in the slaughterhouses. So we've got this very, very sort of confused and compartmentalized thing that we do every single day, and we're loving the cat or dog whom we are living with, and so we need to sort of think about that, step back, and open our minds to this compartmentalization that we're doing, and think how much it does not make sense. It doesn't make sense. What do you think about that, Keith, about our compartmentalization?
I think that I was as guilty of that as anyone before I made the choice to live vegan, before I understood what was going on and what I was complicit in. I had no idea. I had moments where, I was opening a package of roast beef once, and the juice ran down the package and ran down my hand, and I looked at it and I said, "Oh, that's not juice, that's blood." And I wasn't disgusted that someone had been killed and was now part of that individual is in my hand. I just thought, well, I wouldn't drink a cup of blood, so what am I doing? And I threw the package of animal products away. But I didn't make any connection at all. I didn't make it for years. And until a couple of people who were vegan at the time, I don't know that they are now, unfortunately, but I don't know if they are or they're not, but they sat me down and gave me some education. Before I forget, I've seen a couple of the comments in the room, and people are asking if we can post links or information about the the items that you alluded to earlier. Angel, you had mentioned documentaries and things, so I don't know if you want to do that at some point, but maybe, after this is all over. But people are just looking for resources. So,
Okay.
I was able to compartmentalize just as I did with anything else. But what helps me, when I first started living vegan, because I recognized that what was happening in my mind was interspecies slavery. I saw non-humans being exploited, and I thought, I don't do that to humans. It doesn't make any sense for me to do it to non-humans. If I do, I'm living outside my own morals, and I feel uncomfortable when I do that. So I stopped that day. But I always have to put it in human terms. Well, I guess what I was saying was at the beginning, each day I would think, this is fantastic. No one had to suffer or die for my meal. No one is suffering or dying for my shoes, my belt, my jacket, for any, I'm not using any animal products. And that took time to come to that level of consciousness and realize there are animal products in my body care stuff. There's animal products under my sink, in my cleaning products. So I had to, that came in stages for me, just because no one educated me there. I had to self-educate. But I always bring it back to the human context. And I think, because I know people make these, they're confronted with this idea, and the cognitive dissonance happens, and they start thinking, well, I couldn't be vegan because of this inconvenience or that problem. And I've told people that if the only store in town where you could get your favorite thing, and you go there every day and you get your favorite thing, and it's great, if you found out that the person running that store is running a sex slavery ring out the back, and your money was going to support that, what do? Do you just say, well, this is the only place I can get my specific loaf of bread that I love, so I'll just turn a blind eye to that and do it? Or would you stop frequenting that establishment immediately? I know what I would do. I would stop and call the police. Using animals today is not illegal, so we don't have that option. But that's the kind of thing that makes sense to me. When people talk about catch and release fishing as a quote unquote sport, I think waterboarding is catch and release too, but it's not morally justifiable. There's a park across the street from my house. I could catch the kids out there. They're small, they're slow. I'm sure I can overpower them. And I could bring them in my house and make them do, like little puppet shows for me because I think it's entertaining. And I'll release them later. I'll treat them nicely and I'll get them back out the door. Is that okay? And framed in those ways, no, it's not. And really, my mind goes to the more extreme, than that. But I don't want to freak anybody out who might be listening, and trigger any abuse issues or residual traumas. So I won't talk about that. But I've been victimized by predators in my life as a child, and I was caught and I was released. But it's not okay. It's not okay to exploit someone, to use someone, to overpower, dominate, and take from someone what is theirs. It's simply not okay. It's a fundamental issue of justice versus injustice. So, with my tiny little South Florida vegan education group, we're not a big, giant organization. We're a little 501c3 nonprofit, and we work on a shoestring that's so short I can't tie my shoes. And no matter what I do asking for money, barely anybody gives it, so I don't know how to do that. But that's okay, because we will continue on no matter what. We will dip back into our own pockets every time we need to go out and give a morally consistent message that if you believe it's wrong to hurt and kill anybody for your own pleasure, for your own comfort, for your own convenience, then living vegan is the only thing that makes sense. And we'll do that by tabling. We'll do it by giving presentations. We'll do it on the internet. We'll do it every place we can do it, because that's what's needed. You guys, you spoke about the quote unquote animal movement, and Angel, yes, you did give some hope. But generally, when I look at what's come to be known as the movement, I have more effective movements 4 times a day in the bathroom. It's become this morass of counterproductive programming, really, and merchandising and manipulations. So when I started living vegan, I realized that I had been lied to my whole life by the animal agriculture industry, and it took me about 10 years to realize I was being lied to by the organizations I thought were working to help animals, when really so many of them are working to help themselves maintain careers and keep the wheels of their industry turning and the wheels of animal agriculture turning. And that it really disgusts me that it's come to that. So, it's the little guys in the grassroots. I'm sorry.
They've tried to co-opt you as well, haven't they, Keith? Which is what large animal groups tried to do. They tried to co-opt the smaller groups and kind of subsume, a bit like what the multinationals do today. They keep subsuming smaller businesses and whatever. Well, not that I'm saying you're a business, but smaller groups and and just so that they can then have this monopoly. We
were tabling at a I don't know, it was a veg fest. I don't know what that means. Do we need vegetable festivals? Do we need festivals to say, wow, these are tomatoes? Come to our festival of tomatoes and cucumbers. As far as I know, the word veg is a verb, and it means to sit around and be lazy. I don't think it applies to anything else. But so we're at one of these fests, and someone, and I won't name who they are or what their organization is, but it bills itself as the largest animal protection organization in the United States. So it's a big behemoth, and they take in millions of dollars a year. And this individual came up to me, who is someone from a local representative of theirs, and said, how long have you been around? And I said, how many years we've been doing it. And they said to me, I think our organization might want to work with you, and gave me their card. And I thought, I would not, this would be, I'm not selling my soul to save me here. And I said, feel free to give us a call. I'm not, going and talking to them, but I would love to have that conversation and explicitly say why I'm not interested in giving a watered down message that has nothing to do with veganism. We were tabling recently, and someone looked at our stuff and said, vegan education groups. And she said, I don't like to use this is exactly what she did. I don't like to use the V word. It puts people off. And I said, interestingly, we like to keep it right out front and center, because nobody sees the word vegan and goes, ah! They don't do that. That's a myth. And unfortunately, people who are vegan are buying into the myth, because large organizations are propagating that myth and saying, don't use the word vegan. I don't know how that helps. So, and I'll finish in a moment. We made a decision when naming our organization to have that word there, because that's who we are. That's what we do. Alcoholics Anonymous has the word alcohol in their name. They don't say place where people go who might have had a little tiny bit of a drinking problem. You have to name it and in order to do something effective. Anyway. Yeah.
For a millisecond, we had a group in 2006. And literally, we had somebody from a large, I think it was WSPA or something, descend on us to try and co-opt me, and sent numerous emails and was trying to. It's fascinating, really. That I think they must scout around and look for people. But anyway, it's interesting how that happens. But I was going to talk about, Angel was talking about. There's just this little story that I have about I live rurally, and this woman up the road, she has 8 cows, and she was talking to us one day, and she said, and as she was leaving, she said, I don't know what I think Dee Dee said something to her, and she said, yes, they're wonderful, they're individuals, and we really love them. And I thought, but we never give them names. So it was something to that effect. And I thought, wow, isn't that isn't it kind of sad that, she can actually recognize these cows as individuals, and she, they're each very different, and yet she knows that she shouldn't give them names. And when I was watching Cowspiracy the other day, and here's this farm that there's it's one of those grass-fed cow farms, and the pigs are roaming around, and the children were patting these little pigs, and the pigs were being very affectionate, as little pigs are, and they were coming up to them, and then the children were laying with them and patting them, and the interviewer said, the little girl said to him, I'm to the effect of, I don't give them, I don't get too close to them, I don't get too involved or something, because And he said, why is that? And she said, because they'll become bacon. And I just thought, what a sad sort of thing to put children in that position, firstly. But we're all putting that children in that position because if we're not vegan, we're all sort of, these people and their farms exist because we create demand for animal products. And so, and that doesn't matter where they're from, whether they're on these happy, so-called happy mom and pop farms or they're the large industrialized places. You know, we put these people there. We put the people that are in those horrific slaughterhouses, we put them there because we're creating demand. And I just thought, how sad, you know, this little girl is experiencing that and she's got she's really bonded to these little pigs, and then they're going to be taken away and murdered, just like any pig from any farm. And we're responsible if we're not vegan for that. And the same happened, you know, even in this other part of the conspiracy. This farmer killed these couple of ducks. I don't think it was on camera. I couldn't watch. I can never watch that kind of thing. But you could hear the axe falling down on these two ducks, and you could see. Oh, really? Was it? Oh, I couldn't watch it. I just turned away.
It was horrific.
I can't do it. Yeah, and I just sort of thought, wow, you know, I don't think he sort of said, oh, this is gruesome. I think he used the word, but I mean, he's involved in it every day, and you can tell people know this isn't okay. You know, you can tell the people that are on the farms, most of them know this isn't okay, but they keep explaining it as it's business and we have to do it because, you know, we're providing food for people. Well, sentient beings are not food. I don't care. You know, we might think we've put our speciesist, you know, projections, our speciesism, we've decided that they're food, and, you know, but they're not food. They're just like us. And, but it just sort of, it just showed that everybody, you know, realizes they're not these little automatons like Descartes like to, you know, sort of make out they are. They're not these things or robots. They're sentient beings. And it was displayed in that, and, you know, in that cowspiracy, you know, that people, that the little children, you know, were experiencing them as individuals. So, yeah, so it's a very, very sad thing. And it just makes me really sad when I see children sort of involved in that, you know, directly kind of thing.
Sure. And, you know, I've worked in the mental health field for the past 23 years. And I've come to think a lot about what I call the language of denial. And just in what you were talking about, Trish, the idea that you know, someone said, we don't get close to the pigs because one day they'll become bacon. And that to me is the language of denial. That's deceptive. They don't become bacon. It's not, you know, pigs are walking around and suddenly there's a flash of light and they are bacon. You know, there's a process. Someone has to catch them, overpower them, kill them, and do all the things that are necessary to then create this product that people call bacon. Because you know, pig flesh doesn't sound as appetizing, but people will do that. They'll say things like, well, they're going to become bacon. No, they're not becoming anything. We're becoming desensitized to the idea of what's happening to them, and thus allowing that to happen. When we understand it differently, we stop allowing for it. At least, as Angel said, that son was talking about, you know, I'm not paying them to do this, and it's stopping for me. That's how it happens. Yes. A person at a time, a conversation at a time, a vegan at a time. Yes, it's a slow process, and that's unfortunate. But also, there's no big flash of light that comes and suddenly everybody becomes morally consistent. That doesn't happen. So we want to do what we got to do.
But you know what I've noticed actually, though, is that I've noticed actually in the last couple of years there's been this exponential growth. I don't know what you think about it, Angel, but there seems to have almost been this proliferation. I'm not saying that all people that call themselves vegan are actually sort of on the same page, but there's been this proliferation. I feel like pages and recipe books and you know. What do you think about that, Angel? It's like almost like it's exponentially taking off. I sort of feel almost like it's an unstoppable force. It's really that, you know, that thing that quote by Victor Hugo, you know, it's an idea whose time has come. What do you think about that, Angel?
Yeah, well, it's an idea whose time is long overdue. But I do agree with you, and I was going to say that too when Keith was saying that, people are afraid to use the V word. And of course, what's going on now is that the V word has become a lot cooler than it was, 5-10 years ago. I was just talking to a young vegan. She's 20 years old, lives in San Diego. And she was saying to me in her peer group, even amongst people who are not vegan, she said they'll all, order non-dairy milks when they're at, even in a cafe drinking coffee or something like that. She said it's really not cool for people to order milk anymore, cow's milk. They'll have almond milk, they'll have soy milk, but they don't want to be seen drinking cow's milk. And I think that, times are changing. And yes, for those of us who are very consciously aware of, what's going on for the animals all the time, every minute of every day, all around the world, it just can't come fast enough. I mean, it's far, far, far too slow. And yet, on the other hand, something has happened. I would say in the last 2 or 3 years, something's happened where there's just been an explosion. And all of a sudden, us vegans who used to be kind of on the fringe, we're still on the fringe, but the mainstream is much, much more open and accepting and starting to take notice. And especially, I have to say, with, the environmental impact all of a sudden exploding into the, collective consciousness of, between global warming and, the depletion of the planet and everything. And the fact that the connection is now starting to be discussed. I think that has done a lot to sort of bring veganism into the spotlight as something that maybe people should be paying a lot more attention to than they used to, instead of laughing at us for being a bunch of weird extremists. Maybe those weird extremists have been right all along, and hey, that vegan food doesn't actually look that bad. And of course, the more that the vegan food gets out there in restaurants and cafes and recipe books and blogs, all of that stuff. And of course, vegan food has gone to a whole other level in terms of, the standard that's being created by some of these chefs. There are really high-end foods coming out now and products that are on the market. And I think that really helps as well, because people are starting to realize that you can do this and also have incredible, exquisite food. And even if you're a foodie who likes to prepare food, hey, it's a culinary adventure. There's all sorts of wonderful things that you can make. So all of that's starting to become more known. And so I think you're right. I think there has been a tremendous explosion. And I think that that will just continue. You mentioned the word exponentially. And of course, we should start to see a bit of a snowball effect. Yeah,
I think so. I think it's just the amazing. I've just noticed, just in a couple of years, it was sort of, there was a bit of time there. I was thinking, oh God, this is sort of a bit slow, like about 2010. It's a little bit slow, and then suddenly it's just sort of exploded. And I kind of almost feel now that it's it's going to be. It's just really going to catch on. I mean, I find even when I just mention being vegan, or that I'm vegan to someone, they know, they have a clue what I mean by that, and you don't really have to explain it anymore. Even in restaurants, people kind of get that. So it's kind of like, I think it's safe to say that it's really unstoppable. And yes, it's been a long time coming, but it's really unstoppable at this point, and that's a wonderful thing. I'm just really, really pleased with that. So Angel, I just wanted. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Keith.
Can I take just one moment out, because I think this is a good time to do this, and I try to do this each time we have these conversations. I just want to read what the definition of veganism is, because it's become conflated with diets and lifestyles and compassion and a whole lot of things that really isn't. So there is an actual working definition of veganism. It was it was written out by the Vegan Society, and in 1979, this is what they said, and this holds true today. So I'm reading it. Veganism is a philosophy and way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. And then it goes on to add in the dietary aspect, because obviously we talk a lot about food, and there's a dietary component, but it's not just about changing the diet, it's about changing how you treat others. So it goes on to say, by extension, promotes the development and use of animal-free alternatives for the benefit of humans, animals, and the environment. In dietary terms, down the list, it denotes the practice of dispensing with all products derived wholly or partly from animals. So it's important to understand that it's a philosophy and a way of living, and that's different than a lifestyle. When I was in high school, hip-hop was my lifestyle. It was a new thing, and I was on the forefront, and I looked really silly in my parachute pants and breakdancing. And I can't even believe I'm a retired breakdancer. I can't believe I've disclosed that in public, but it is what it is. So, that's a lifestyle, and lifestyles change when you decide that, hey, I don't feel like doing that anymore. I don't, getting piercings might be a lifestyle, and one day you don't want them anymore. So a way of living is different. A way of living is something that's fundamental and something that one has internalized. And Trish always says, once you internalize the ethical position of veganism, then you live vegan and you don't go back to anything else. There's no cheat days. There's no well, maybe a little bit here and there, or oh, those shoes are nice and they're leather. What do I do? You know what you do. You don't engage in the exploitation, enslavement, and execution of innocent, vulnerable beings. So that's all.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Angel, if you could you just tell us just a little bit? We'll probably wrap it up in the next 10 minutes, but if you could just tell us a little bit about maybe the wool industry, so people understand that when vegans reject, we say we reject the use of animals for food, clothing, entertainment, and other reasons. That there are the reasons why we reject the animal products that we wear, and other reasons. Well, it's all there's no moral differences between any of these products. But if you could just maybe tell us a little bit about the wool industry, just so that people sort of know, because people sort of have this idea that for some reason these industries don't really, that these animals aren't killed, or that that there's nothing really wrong with it. They just, you know what I mean? They think they're harmless kind of products. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yes, that's the one.
Well, I think the starting point is just to recognize that all these industries are intertwined. It's the animal industry. It doesn't matter which branch of the animal industry. This is the animal trade. It's the trade in living beings. It is a slavery trade, like Keith was saying. And it's, what makes it slavery is that these are living, sentient, conscious beings whose lives do not belong to them. They are in complete control of other people, whether they are born, whether they are killed, whether they breed, whether they're allowed to keep contact with their children. Everything in their lives is dictated by somebody else, somebody who owns them. So that's true no matter which aspect of the animal industry we're talking about, across the board. And then, of course, and the fact that they are all connected to each other, as in the animals who are raised for wool, when they no longer can be used for wool, because, all animals grow older, and actually it doesn't take very long in the wool industry before, this is something I just learned recently, actually, before their fleece quality starts to decline. Yeah. And in a matter of years, when their fleece quality starts to decline, the animals are no longer useful to the wool industry. And so what happens? You think they put them out to pasture and let them live a happy life of retirement? Of course not. That wouldn't be economically viable to an industry that needs to always keep up its bottom line and its profit margin. So what happens, of course, is that they're killed, and And of course, they're used for meat. I mean, that's how, wool and meat are very, very much interlinked. So, yeah, often people don't really realize that. They think that it doesn't hurt a sheep to shear its fur, but of course, the truth is that's not true either. When I was quite a young person in New Zealand, where I'm from, there was this wool farm. Wool's a big deal in New Zealand, and as kids, it was one of the things they used to take us to for an outing, field trip or whatever. We used to go to this farm because it was like a petting zoo, and they had a whole demonstration, and they would show us the shearing of the sheep. And this was in an environment where they were gearing it to children. So it was, I'm sure, heavily sanitized compared to what it really is behind the scenes and what it usually is on, large scale farms and, all sorts of things. But anyway, so it was a fairly, happy farm. It was a model farm. And I remember seeing, I was a kid, but I'll never forget it, this sheep who was being shorn. And the guy took the equipment and he just ran down here and pulled the eye of the sheep. And I'm not saying that the sheep actually sustained any injury from it, but even as a little girl, I remember seeing it and thinking, that's not harmless. That's not, that sheep is not okay with that. And that's just one tiny little example. And of course, what actually goes on, especially on, I don't really know all of the differences between, the large and the small scale wool farming, but a lot of the wool farming involves this process of mulesing. And of course, many vegan activists will already know what that means. A lot of non-vegans won't know what it means, but, it's a pretty horrendous thing that they do in order to stop the sheep from getting this, basically like a fly strike, where they basically slice off the skin down by the rear end of the sheep, so that there is no fur in that area anymore, so that it's smooth skin. Horrendously painful, as with everything that's done to animals, done without any anesthetic or anything like that. But, the thing is, whether or not they were doing that, the fact is they're doing that because they view these animals as economic units. They view them as resources. They view them as money-making machines. As long as animals are being viewed in that way, it doesn't matter whether it's small scale, large scale, free range, cage free, industrial farming, whatever it is, when animals are being viewed as commodities, when they're being viewed as resources, when they're being used as, profit making units, their rights and their interests are not going to end up being respected. There's just no way that that both things are possible. It's just not. And that's the whole thing about the animal industry. It doesn't matter what branch we're talking about. It doesn't matter how big or small the scale is of what people are buying. People need to understand that it's this whole way of viewing animals. Who are they? Are they sentient individuals who value their lives? Or are they inanimate objects who we can make money from in the same way that we use other, we buy and sell things. We buy and sell books. We buy and sell CDs. We buy and sell cars. We buy and sell furniture. That's one thing. Those are inanimate objects. To buy and sell living beings is a slave trade. Yeah. And, there was a time when, and of course, it's not that human slavery doesn't still go on today. Of course it does. But there was a time when even in the most progressive countries in the world, human slavery was perfectly accepted. And, people just like us were going about their lives using using humans as slaves in various ways. And it was accepted across the board, except for a handful of people who were speaking out against it and were viewed at the time as extremist and fanatical. And now we're in a time where, again, at least amongst people who have moved beyond that mentality, we think of it as being absolutely abhorrent. And when you say, Trish, that veganism is an unstoppable force, I think that you're right. And I think that one of the things that makes it an unstoppable force is that we vegans are an unstoppable force. And we're not going to, we're not going to be quiet about this. This is not something that we're going to just sit back and let it continue. No, this is people who think that vegans are loud and pushy and forcing their ideas on others. Frankly, this is an idea that needs to be forced on others. This is an idea that needs to be pushed, because talk about, forcing things on others. The animal industry is forcing all sorts of pain and suffering and misery on sentient beings. And those of us who are in the know about it, and those of us who are passionate about ending it, are not going to stop, until this whole thing is over. And in that way, I think it is an unstoppable force. And I think that, the time is going to come. I don't know how long it's going to take, but the time is going to come when it is viewed in the same way that human slavery is viewed today. And, that's the goal that I always try to keep in mind. It's just that's what we're aiming for, and it is going to happen. It has to happen because it's the power of human progress, it's the power of the evolution of society. It just has to be.
Yeah, the arc of moral justice is long, but it eventually, it's true, and that's where it's going. And truth can't be really suppressed in the end. It's sort of straight and true, and kind of it cuts through eventually. It has a tendency to always make its way, and that's why it's so easy in a way to talk about. It's so easy to talk about veganism because it is sort of something that is true. It's undeniable that it's a violence and an injustice to sentient beings. That's undeniable. People can pretend all sorts of things, but the fact is it's tremendous violence. That cannot be denied. So, the truth will eventually prevail. And I just wanted to say to you, Angel, that we'll just wrap it up here. And if you were to, to sort of give a little kind of I don't really like the name elevator pitch, but if you were going to give a sort of
how about an escalator pitch, a short staircase, just a couple of little steps.
That's right, a little tiny bit
from the curb to the street.
If you were going to give a talk about why a person should, if somebody's viewing this video and thinking, well, so some of this really kind of clicks, what would you say to them to encourage them or to consider becoming vegan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's a good question. I did just want to say, if we're going to wrap it up, it would be nice, before I do that, just to quickly remind people that, visiting Gentle World's website is a really good place to go to learn both about Gentle World, if you're interested to know more about the organization and maybe even how you can help with some of the work that we're doing, or if you're interested in visiting or you know somebody who might be interested in visiting. Our website is gentleworld.org, and we have a Facebook page as well, and we have a YouTube channel that has some videos of Gentle World and what we do, interviews with some of the people who have visited, which also are very inspiring because some of these people are new vegans and just having their realizations and expressing them even on camera at the time that we're doing it. So I very much encourage people to check that out. And also we do have, if you go to the website, we have a monthly newsletter that you can subscribe to. And we try to, keep that filled with really informative and inspirational articles. Trish, you had mentioned that the website has lots of great information on it. And we really have tried to cover a lot of different subject matter, everything from, the many different aspects of the ethical issue, all the way through, how you do it and the things you need to look out for and hidden ingredients that you might not be aware of and ways to replace things like cheese and milk and meat and all sorts of other things. Leather,
and that
wool,
wonderful
silk.
cookbook. That wonderful cookbook that you have too, Angel.
Yes, that's right.
We know about that.
Yep, we have 2 cookbooks. I think the one you're talking about is Incredibly Delicious, Recipes for a New Paradigm. And that's got over 500 vegan recipes, actually, and 40 color photographs, so it makes a beautiful gift book. And it's also got a lot of other vegan information in it as well, and lots of really inspiring quotes from people throughout history who have sort of advocated for taking others into our circle of compassion. And then we also have a book called The Cookbook for People Who Love Animals, which was the very first full-length, completely vegan cookbook in the United States. Gentle World published that in 1981. And it's sold over 100,000 copies over the years and is a true vegan classic. And we often hear from people who tell us that was their very first introduction to veganism. So that's really worth checking out as well.
That's really wonderful.
Yeah. And so that's just...
I'm so grateful to you, Angel. Hey, Keith, that you put in so much time, because Angel just works tirelessly. She's been working tirelessly, and she's very humble, and she just keeps going and going and going and going. And the blogs and what she does, and what she does at Gentle World, and the recipe books and all of that. It's a wonderful thing, and I want to thank everybody at Gentle World who's established that organization and who just keeps it going and just keeps on that path, because that's really wonderful. And I'm sure it's encouraged so many people, to go vegan, and it's really encouraged this grassroots nonviolent, movement, which, I think is only just going to go from strength to strength because of if the clarity, if it's clear, the message we're trying to put across. But I'll just go back to your
the elevator pitch.
You don't have to do the elevator pitch. There's more. You can do as long a pitch as you like.
Yeah, as to why people should go vegan, gosh, I mean, it's really as simple as the fact that we can. Because if we know that we can, and if we know that, as I say, some of my friends have been vegan for almost 50 years. So it's kind of at this point tried and true. I mean, yes, people have different bodies and different health needs and such, and everybody should always be responsible for making sure that they get their own needs met. But I can assure you that at this point, there are enough vegans out there who are thriving and really setting an example of the fact that we really do not have a need for animal products. If people still think that we have a need for animal products, I believe it's because they haven't really put the effort into really trying to meet their needs through plant sources, because I think it's all possible to do. It might, for some people, it might require a bit more perseverance. I do believe that. Some people might have compromised systems, and they might need to do a little bit more than others to make sure that their needs are met. So, but with that in mind, I believe we can all be vegan. And if we can all be vegan, if we have the power to do that, if it's possible for us to do that, then we really have no justification for not doing that. Because, the fact is, nobody can deny that this is an industry that involves extreme suffering. Not just suffering, but extreme suffering to creatures who are just as capable of suffering as we are. As far as we can tell from everything that we can observe, they experience it pretty much exactly the same way we would if we were in that position. All you have to do is watch them. You don't need any scientific, evidence to prove that. Just open your eyes and watch one of these films. People will often say, what's the difference between eating animals and picking carrots? Carrots scream too. We get that line every now and then.
Yes.
I invite anybody who says that to walk through a slaughterhouse and then walk through a garden and pick some carrots and see what the experience is like. Because one of them is absolutely horrendous, and most people wouldn't even want to watch a video of something like that. Most people wouldn't even want to have something like that described to them, let alone go in there and experience it themselves. And yet almost everybody finds the experience of walking through a garden or an orchard and picking plant foods to be actually an incredibly uplifting experience. And I think that's a huge clue for us, because it says a lot about how we are designed as individuals on this planet, how we're really meant to be living our lives. The fact that we can feel for others is a tremendous sign to us of how good we can actually feel when we do remove our participation in others' suffering. It's a tremendous relief. And anybody who's, listening to this and they're on the brink, if anybody's feeling like, I'd like to try it. I don't know if I can, or I don't know if I have the moral courage or something like that. Just forget all of those doubts. Just forget all of those doubts and just do it. And if you do it, you'll see what it is that we're talking about. It's a tremendous joy. It's a wonderful, wonderful way to live. We all love it. All the vegans love it. And all we're saying is, hey, try it out. You'll see. You'll feel the same way. It's wonderful. We love being vegan. We love eating vegan. We love dressing vegan. We love everything about being vegan. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
There's no inconvenience to it that in any way comes close to outweighing all the benefits that we receive.
It's true.
And, anybody out there who has a social conscience, just know that until you get past this step, it's always going to be bothering you. It's always going to be bothering you, because there is no conscience that is not bothered by the infliction of unnecessary harm.
That's so true, and I think that's a wonderful note to end on, Angel. We really appreciate you sharing your insights into this and for the wonderful work that you do. And I've mentioned that a few times during the podcast. I popped up gentleworld.org, and I encourage everybody to check that out, because it's a great resource. And so we'll wrap it up here, and I want to thank you so much, Angel, for everything. And thank you so much, Keith. Keith, if you visit South Florida Vegan Education Group, and that's at veganeducationgroup.com, and please support Keith and Elena Brodsky's work, because they're wonderful individuals, and they do great work. They work tirelessly to promote this issue that is the greatest, one of the greatest issues of the 21st century. And I know some people will think, well, that's funny, but it's true. It's actually one of the greatest social justice issues of the 21st century, and that's why all of us spend so much time talking about it. It's not that we like to just hear the sound of our own voice and just, we actually really, really want people to consider going vegan, because that's how we're going to create a really peaceful world where it's at the fundamental root of a lot of the violence that's happening today. So I want to just quickly note that Eunice Wong will be joining us next week. It'll probably just be myself and Eunice Wong, who is an activist, a writer. She's written the companion book to What the Health, and she's going to be a really interesting guest. Eunice is an actor as well. And What the Health is a film that has come out recently on Netflix, and you might want to check that out, because that's the ancillary benefit of becoming vegan, is that the tremendous health impact, and also it also indicates how lots of different industries are invested in keeping us unhealthy, and that means the big pharma and animal industry, and that's what the Health also covers. But it shows the tremendous benefits of becoming vegan, just in a health ancillary benefit. So I'm very, very pleased that we've had this discussion, and maybe at some point, Angel, you might like to join us again to discuss the latest in what's happening on Gentle World. So with that, I want to thank Steve Grumbine again from Real Progressives for allowing us, giving this space to talk about this very, very important issue of veganism. And I hope that you'll join us again next week on Friday, 9:15 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time on Real Progressives, and we'll talk with Eunice Wong. And so join us then. And thanks so much again to Angel Flinn for joining us, and Keith Berger for joining us. Okay,
and thank you both so much, too.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Angel. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you, Trish. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. And just so the people who are watching don't think that we're ignoring you, it's just that we cannot see the comments that are in the thread. So I have a habit of going in the thread later on at some point, and I'll address any comments and any questions.
If anybody has any questions, sincere questions are welcome, and we'll try and address that in the future. That would be great. Okay, well, thanks so much for watching, and join us again next week, Friday, 9:15 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time with Eunice Wong. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye for now.
Thanks, Trish. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.